Now, I told you guys on the show recently, I don't know if it was during Crystal Kyle and Friends or if it was on Secular Talk, the Kyle Kulinski show. I don't know when I said this, but I had a hunch that during the course of our 20 years in Afghanistan, there was probably a year-long period where Afghanistan wasn't mentioned once on any of the networks. So we're a country at war. And for an entire year of that war, my prediction was, I bet none of the outlets talked about it at all. Because listen, I've been doing this full-time since late 2012, early 2013, and I follow this stuff super closely. And the print outlets, I think the entire time covered them to one extent or another, even though it wasn't nearly as much as it should have been. But the TV outlets, no, they suck at their job on another level, and they're terrible. So, I regret to inform you that my prediction was incorrect. I wasn't right. However, I was really, really, really close to being right. Take a look at this. This is from an outlet called Responsible Statecraft. Minutes of broadcast network Afghanistan coverage per year. Per year. So this is the nightly news where most Americans get their news. This isn't cable news, this is nightly news, okay? In 2020, Afghanistan got a full 5 minutes of coverage between all three major networks combined. 5 minutes of coverage, all three major networks combined. Oh my God. Oh my God. Now, this is where people would say, yeah, but that was coronavirus time, so what are you going to do? Listen, I get it, but there's a lot of time in the day, bro. And there's a lot of hours that you're doing the news. You're only going to do 5 minutes of coverage between three different networks of Afghanistan, a war where we're in our 20th year or 19th year at the time. That is totally unforgivable. You see, 2019, 71. So that's a little over an hour of coverage for an entire year among three networks. By the way, Secular Talk has done more than all these three giant networks combined, with many less hours on the air. 2018, 66 minutes. So again, an hour coverage. That, if I'm not mistaken, it was either 2018 or 2019, the year with the highest civilian casualties. In one of those years alone, the U.S. dropped over 7,000 bombs, killed a record number of civilian casualties. And the entire war got less than an hour of coverage for an entire year over three networks combined. And then you could go back and see all the different numbers there. 2016 was also a phenomenal low point, only 27 minutes. In 2009 and 2010, there was more coverage. That was because of the surge. That coincides with the surge. And then obviously you go all the way back to 2001, and you had 940 minutes. That, sort of dominated the coverage. But listen, even in 03, 04, 05, 06, 100 minutes for three networks combined for an entire year, that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. So even though my prediction wasn't completely correct, it wasn't too far from wrong. So let me give you another quote here from Responsible Statecraft. They say, while the pathetic amount of coverage of the conflict last year can be partially explained by the virtually total dominance of the news agenda by the COVID-19 pandemic, the three networks devoted a total of only 362 minutes to Afghanistan in the preceding 5 years, or just 2 hours of coverage per network, or an average of only 24 minutes per network per year. So in the preceding 5 years, 5 whole years, there was an average of 24 minutes per network per year. For a war we've been at well over a decade, 24 minutes per network per year. That's like 2 Secular Talk segments on Afghanistan. I'm a random idiot YouTuber with a loud mouth, and I cover the news that matters way more than the news networks themselves do. That's unacceptable, that's unforgivable, and that's exactly what the military-industrial complex wanted. Because if you covered it with a skeptical eye, if you were honest about what's going on, if you reported extensively on the Afghanistan papers and then had your week-long, 2-week-long total meltdown as to what the hell we're doing there, they would hate it, and that would undermine their agenda. So the CIA and the Pentagon and the deep state wanted the media to be quiet while the gravy train was continuing, while they were there profiteering off of war, grifting, making millions and millions of dollars. Maybe, I mean, there was $2 trillion that went to the defense contractors. That's an incentive to want to stay there, isn't it? Isn't it? The trillions of dollars of mineral wealth in Afghanistan is an incentive to want to stay there, isn't it? The opium, that's an incentive as well, isn't it? No coverage on that. Very little coverage of the warlords with child sex slaves. Very little coverage of us massacring innocent civilians, bombing weddings, bombing a hospital like we did in Kabul in the Obama years, at the end of the Obama years. Don't talk about any of that. Only flip out when we withdraw. You see how they manufacture consent now? It's selective outrage and selective coverage. You got more coverage on Afghanistan from this one little rinky-dinky YouTube show, which is held back colossally by the algorithm. Got more coverage from me than all of the major networks in the evening news combined. That's ABC, CBS, and NBC. The nightly news, where probably most Americans get their news. 5 minutes in 2020, 24 minutes on average per year for the last 5 years. This is disgraceful. And this is exactly what the military-industrial complex wants, exactly what the CIA wants, exactly what the Pentagon wants. And that's who's really pulling the strings here. Because you have the contributors are former CIA operatives. They're not even hiding it. They're not even hiding it. If this doesn't frustrate you, if this doesn't piss you off, you're just not paying attention. You've become numb to the disgusting reality that we live in. This should absolutely fire you up. And again, this is one of the reasons why new media is so colossally important. But we're fighting a tsunami. We're standing there as a tsunami comes at us because all of us we have our hands tied by the algorithm. They used to recommend my stuff all the time on YouTube when it was a more neutral, open, fair system because it was more of a meritocracy. The algorithm was more of a meritocracy. If your stuff was popular, it would get spread more. Now, they hold you back. If you're even slightly edgy. That's why if you guys put on autoplay, you'll realize it very quickly. You'll be redirected all the time to, if you watch a secular talk video, the next thing that plays almost is never a secular talk video. John Oliver, Trevor Noah, one of the big 3 networks. That's what it is. Go ask somebody who was a listener to secular talk 5 years ago what would happen. You watch a secular talk video, and what happens? Then another one plays. Then another one plays. Then your whole recommended side box is all secular talk videos. There's a reason that they do that. They want to redirect back to the authoritative news sources. Well, here's the authoritative news sources. Here's what they did. This is what they did. They ignored the war in Afghanistan. They ignored the scandals. They ignored the civilian deaths. They ignored the allies who were warlords with child sex slaves. They ignored the Pentagon Papers where military officials themselves were like, what the hell are we doing here? What's the end goal? What's the purpose? There is no purpose. They ignored the interfighting there in the first place. They ignored us intervening in a civil war. In every way imaginable, they ignored the important stories, and now they're pumping up the bullshit narrative that it's an outrage that we got out. Support independent media however you can. Share independent media stuff however you can. Because again, there's some of us were there the entire time reporting on what was happening in Afghanistan. Just type in secular talk Afghanistan and scroll through and see how many times we covered Afghanistan. And compare that to these absolute charlatans, con men, frauds. 5 minutes in all of 2020. 5 minutes between 3 major networks. 24 minutes per year for the previous 5 years. We're late in the second decade of a war where people are dying, where we have record Afghan civilian casualties. If you can't tell, I'm very frustrated by this. I'm very heated by this. Because what the hell's the antidote? If we have our hands tied behind our back and we can't correct the narrative and we can't get popular enough, and they're not doing their job right, what's going to happen? Well, we're seeing it happen right in front of our eyes. What's going to happen is, even though getting out of Afghanistan is a 63% issue in the American public, Biden followed through on that, and his approval dropped on Afghanistan from 55% to 25%. So he did the thing Americans want, and because the media does ruthless, relentless propaganda, he plummets in his approval rating because of it. If you ever want good things to ever happen again, ever, we need to have a media that's actually functional and does the right thing and tells the truth, and we're nowhere near that right now. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.